about living in Basingstoke are it's an upcoming town.
It's got some fine art in the town centre. It's got the Rope Street Willy.
The towering retail parks.
Halfords is a highlight.
It's a very friendly, welcoming place.
If Basingstoke was an animal, it'd be a little hedgehog. It's quite cute inside, but it's actually quite spiky to look at.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from the Haymarket Theatre in Basingstoke, the Chicago of the M3 corridor. The first thing that strikes you with this town is that whereas some places are built out of stone and other towns are built out of brick, Basingstoke is made entirely out of roundabouts. Millions and millions of roundabouts every few yards that make you think that this is probably how the town built up in the first place. People coming through just got stuck going round, round and round until they went, oh, sod it, we'll never get out, we might as well just live here. This town, though, I think it's fair to say, doesn't always have an image of being the most exciting place. But I want to try and overcome that, really, and I can proudly say that this was a challenge. So, it is often said there is no soul or identity to the town, but I think there is a spirit here. It's even quite quirky and eccentric. The trouble is, the town doesn't always help itself. For example, on the About Basingstoke website that promotes the town, one of the main boasts is, we are proud to be home to the national headquarters of the motoring organisation, the AA. I bet that brings in the tourists. We looked at the brochures and saw the photo of the sun setting behind the AA building with the light reflecting off the Chinam Business Park and said, Rome can wait, that's where we're spending our summer vacation. In any case, I would imagine the AA probably moved here because it's the place that they most often get called out to. Where they go, oh yeah, I see what's happened, mate. Yeah, you've got so frustrated with the roundabouts, you've abandoned your car and set fire to it. That's what's happened. But I bet they were busy December 2009. I remember this, all right, but it was in the news because that was when there were snowstorms and national newspaper headlines such as 3,000 motorists forced to abandon their vehicles around Basingstoke. It was another normal day for the Hampshire town. The borough here is officially known as Basingstoke and Deane, as these are the largest and smallest places within the borough's boundary, and not, as I thought, named after an unsuccessful ice skating duo. You've fallen over again, Basingstoke. I'm going off and join with my friend Torville. But there is an organisation called Destination Basingstoke that showed me round the town when I first came, and they were lovely, and they took me to Festival Square. But if I'm honest, if it wasn't called that, I'm not sure festival would be the first word to spring to mind. But someone in the council at some point must have gone, nope, it's got a spike on the roof and a giant plastic cactus. Don't tell me there's anywhere in Mexico says festival more than that. And the residents themselves, sometimes not all of you, help with the image either. I found an internet forum all about Basingstoke. So I thought, there's bound to be loads of exciting things and debates. And I promise this is one of the first discussions I found on that forum. New street lights have been turned on in our street, but they're not as bright as I thought they'd be. And then someone's replied, well, I liked them. I can't wait until they come to my street. And then the first person's come back with, I was just surprised when they turned on that they were dim compared to the old ones. And then someone came on with an explanation. The brightness of light depends where you live and what height they are. The low ones are 24 watts, the common ones are 36 watts, and the large ones are 55 watts. You can also get 60-watt arcs up Abbey Road, and they're very bright. You're so bored you go lamppost spotting. And then I read that you've got more CCTV cameras per person than any other town in Britain. This must be an all-time record for the most cameras filming the least events of any interest. Some poor copper has to sit through all this, occasionally going, oh, hang on, there's a group hanging around by a lamppost there. I wonder what they're up to. Oh, they're taking down its number and studying its wattage. But this is the point I'm trying to make. Of course, there must be more to Basingstoke than this. Because Basingstoke was a small market town until the 1960s, when it was rebuilt to take in 100,000 new people. Now, it is not conceivable that the people who moved here were the 100,000 most boring people in Britain. A clue to the fact that the town can be interesting is in this book by a local historian called Basingstoke and its Contribution to World Culture. Now, the book does start off on a positive note, which I will read in full, the opening paragraph. Basingstoke is one of the most derided towns in England. Its reputation is as an overdeveloped eyesore of numbing dullness. Its very name lends itself to mockery. Basing joke, boring Stoke and the ironic amazing Stoke are used by its residents, not always with affection. But the cheerful thing is that it's not always been like this. According to the book, John Wesley, the Methodist preacher, came here in 1759, and he wrote, "The inhabitants are like wild beasts, slow of heart and dull of understanding." Knew how to win people round for his cause, didn't he? Surely, I know what you'll all be thinking. You'll be thinking, yes, Mark, but it must have been more exciting in 1669. Well, the Grand Duke of Tuscany came that year, and his assistant kept a diary, and one day he wrote, "His Highness, arriving betimes at Basingstoke, set out to explore it on foot. But it seemed so wretched it hardly repaid the effort of walking a few paces." And now I know what you'll be saying. Now you'll say, oh yeah, but what about 1882? And it's a fair point, except that in 1882 an article in the Times started about midway between London and Salisbury as a benighted little town inhabited chiefly by a race of barbarians. Oh, now, at this point, what were you up to here? Maybe the place was actually run by barbarians, and you'll probably find that up to 1760 it was Neolithic. Tribes going, I don't know why, but we feel compelled to build stone circles every few yards. Now, I can see that being called a race of barbarians isn't entirely a compliment, but there is another side to it, which does suggest that the people here weren't boring. And there are still sparks of this. For example, I found a couple of stories in the Basingstoke Gazette, such as this charming tale. A couple spent their wedding night behind bars on Friday after allegedly brawling their way around Basingstoke. Hundreds of stunned guests at the Ringway Hotel are said to have watched the newlyweds attack staff and later throw pool balls at regulars in an Oak Ridge pub, leaving their marriage certificate bloodstained on the pub carpet. They're making an effort. There's another story in the Basingstoke Gazette. Last Friday night, a man ran into Basingstoke police station and shouted, "Here's one for the bill." The bomb scare was diffused 2 hours later when the police saw the holdall move. They pulled back the zip and a live cockerel popped out. The cockerel has been taken to an animal sanctuary in Overton. But the thing is, incidents like that, they do make me think, well, there is a soul to the town. You just got to go looking for it. The trouble is, it was dug up and moved to make way for all the shopping malls. And the planners were really thorough, to be fair to them. The way they decided they would make everybody feel cosy and homely would be to have a place where to get anywhere you have to cross a metal walkway and then down some concrete stairs and past somewhere called Service Area 6. And then past Monsoon, Vodafone, Clinton cards and dustbins shaped like penguins. Until you lose all sense of direction so that the SAS could train their recruits by putting them there, spinning them round and then seeing if they can get outside within 4 hours. even within the development, a bit of the old Basingstoke shines through. For example, with the statue in Woke Street. That even the council's website describes as the largest phallic statue in Britain. And it's known, as I'm sure you all know, as the Woke Street Willie. And the baffling thing is you can stand and just stare at it for ages and not work out what it's meant to be. It's supposed to be a roundabout. Maybe there was some cheap local builder who just went, oh, all right, I'll do you a statue. I can't do horses or angels, but I can do a knob. But Woke Street and the town hall and the market area, you can still sort of make out what it was when it was a market town before the development. It does look as if it was once a thrilling place to be, which it must have been, because it was on the Great Western Road where travellers would make their first stop out of London, and it was full of industry, such as the draper's shop of Thomas Burberry on Winchester Street. Now, Burberry became famous for his lines of clothing worn by the upper class. He was a strict Victorian, he hated alcohol, he sacked women if they appeared too fond of boys, so he must have been delighted that his line of clothing became the uniform of the chav. Now, apparently, at the time of the early 20th century, most explorers wore Burberry. When Amundsen became the first man to reach the South Pole, he took Burberry tents and wrote a letter to the shop that went, "Dear sirs, heartfelt thanks. During the sledge journey to the pole, Burberry overalls proved real good friends indeed." Hey, you can't help thinking there, no one's going to be making a film out of your diaries, are they? I'm going outside, I might not be back for some time. That is drama. Not, I do like a sturdy overall. I saw an original Burberry coat that Burberry made for the agricultural workers. So Basingstoke's farm workers must have been the fashion icons of the time. This is Jethro modelling the low-cut peasant smock from Burberry's autumn range, with buoyant stitching to enhance the sturdy labouring thigh, accessorised with pitchfork by Louis Vuitton. Back before even Burberry's time, the land here was owned by various nobles, including the Kingsmill family that can be traced to the 12th century. But here's a sentence that I read about them that you really don't see written all that often. The last Kingsmill was William, a certified lunatic whose niece Elizabeth was a dwarf who married a naval officer 25 years her junior. Their descendants remained at Sidmonton Court overlooking Watership Down, where Andrew Lloyd Webber now lives. How many magic mushrooms would you have to take before you dreamt up that if it wasn't true? I've tried, honestly, my imagination will not go, but the nearest I got was Lord Andover was an Eskimo transsexual who married Bill and Ben and lived in their flower pot, now used as a massage parlour by Lemmy out of Motorhead, but it still doesn't get there. A character that more of you might know about is John Arlott. John Arlott, of course, was a writer and a cricket commentator who was brought up here, and he called his biography that I've got there, Basingstoke Boy. Now, I used to love him when I was a kid. I remember there was another commentator at one point said, "And now, as the sun sets in the west, I'll pass you over to John Arlott." And Arlott went, "Thank you very much. And you can rest assured that if the sun sets anywhere other than the west, I'll be the first to let you know." There is also some dispute about whether it was Arlott or another commentator who was talking about a player called Cunis and said, "Funny name, Cunis. Neither one thing nor the other." Now, Arlott was also a wine critic, so his favourite part of the town's history may well have been the period between 1880 and 1883, when this town seemed to be genuinely at war against the Salvation Army. Because in 1880, this was a big brewing town, so the Salvation Army targeted Basingstoke with their temperance efforts. The Salvation Army's founder, Catherine Booth, visited here and said, "We must invent aggressive means of drawing their debauched out of public houses and let them know they're going to hell." See, we think of the Salvation Army as these quaint little types playing a trumpet, but back then they were like a football team. They probably came into town singing, "Your ring road needs revoking, your souls will end up smoking, na 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 na." So they moved into the area and they held these daily services outside factories and pubs, but this resulted in mass brawls across the town. There were dozens of court cases, such as the one against John Jennings for disrupting a Salvation Army service. Now, according to the records, when he was asked to stop, he said, "You can talk to my arse." Because you do like a philosophical debate. There's probably been a radio programme round here with Melvin Bragg going, "With us this morning is the senior lecturer on religious studies from Basingstoke. Professor, how do you reply to the child that the rise in secularism is accompanied by a decline in notions of morality?" "You can talk to my arse." So there were huge battles that went on round here for days at a time, and historians have sometimes had debates about underlying causes of things like this. But there's a brilliant explanation in this book, The Basingstoke Riots, about these battles that says, "I suspect the main motivation for disrupting the Salvation Army is it was great fun." For Basingstoke's binge drinkers, the riots were probably the most exciting thing they'd ever enjoyed. And we have the writer of that book with us tonight, Bob Clark. Hello, Bob.
Watcha.
Bob, there's so many brilliant stories with this. But first of all, I just want you to sort of like go through the scale of it, because there was a battle at Church Street, wasn't there? Can you just want to say how big that was?
Well, the population of Basingstoke then was 6,700. The Battle of Church Square had 3,000 people in it. Teeth flying everywhere, blood flying everywhere. It was wonderful. True. Made the headlines in the national papers, and one said it had made the name of Basingstoke a disgrace throughout the civilised world. Well, of course, as you know, they spoke of little else in Venice.
There was a story I was reading about a man who was drunk in court, and he ended up having to be restrained, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that chap, Ernest Fitzgerald, he was forever breaking pub windows, fighting in the streets, fathering illegitimate children, poaching. You know, this was a town full of them. I mean, it put Basingstoke on the map.
Thanks very much to Bob. Cheers. The town actually became so used to fighting at that time. It seems extraordinary now, doesn't it? Here's one account of the town around this time. Election days are occasions for joyous rioting. Even cricket matches are tediously prone to ending in violent disorder. I wish I'd heard our lot commentated on that game. There goes Fat Jimmy coming round the wicket with a Stanley knife. There's a crowd on the boundary chanting, "Who are you? Who are you?" And one wonders if they don't know who their adversaries are. Why it is that they're kicking them in an area not distinct from the testicles. But who would Basingstoke go to war with now? Well, I reckon Winchester would be a fair bet. This is something I found on the not always exhilarating Basingstoke forum on the internet, complaining about the coverage that Basingstoke gets on the South Today news. What always makes me laugh is if the whole of Basingstoke was on fire and a leaf fell out of a tree in Winchester. The story about the leaf would be the lead story, and the story about Basingstoke would be at the very end of the show. 3 exclamation marks. Is that true? Yes! Isn't it disgusting? You can see why injustice on this scale winds people up. People get all worked up about Palestinians, but what do they say about the South Today Winchester fiasco, eh? But Winchester obviously has also been pampered compared to you. Basingstoke has been through all of these upheavals. This was a small market town. Suddenly then everything was demolished and replaced by ring roads and shopping malls. And the turning point was Professor Abercrombie's Greater London Plan at the end of the war that aimed to move 1 million Londoners away from London. Now, this leads, as I'm sure you're expecting, to George Formby. Because George came to Basingstoke as part of propaganda for town planning, because he made a film here called He Snoops to Conquer about a town that was going to be redeveloped. You do get a sense from this film of how marvellous these plans must have seemed, because they must have felt like a reward for the war, along with the health service. It makes you wonder when you see lads now bragging about the latest modern contraption they've got as life-changing, an iPad or an HD TV, what they would have been like back then with the things that really transformed lives. If they'd gone, like, a man got to come round my crib, lad, I've got something sick to show you, innit? It's an inside toilet, fam. In Basingstoke, the main development didn't start until the 1960s. Now, at one point, the government did consider Hook, which is just up the road, as the place for all the development. But it is claimed that the reason Hook wasn't chosen for redevelopment was because the Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, heard about this. He knew that this was land that the Queen's uncle used for bird watching. So people get nostalgic for those days, but that's what it was like then. I'm afraid we can't build a hospital there. Those woods are where the Duke of Portsmouth likes to expose himself. Now, I think the intentions were good. This vision of this new planned world of new technology and millions of cars. And if you came here then as one of the people that moved in, it must have seemed thrilling, like you were creating a new town, like pioneers in the Wild West. And folk moved out here to build themselves a new life where every man should have 3 acres and a roundabout. After work, we keep ourselves entertained with a giant concrete penis. That's all we need. Since the first redevelopment in the 60s, it's then been the supermarkets and the chain stores that have made it more difficult, I think, for the town to keep an identity. And now there are taller office blocks as well, which gives you one of your proudest claims, in fact, that according to the council, we have the tallest building between London and New York. And that's marvellous. Who worked that out? Did someone actually draw a line on a map and go, nothing in Whitchurch beats us? Not even the Co-op. Given that most of between London and New York is the Atlantic Ocean, which doesn't have all that many skyscrapers, but it's a brilliant boast, again, because it's the eccentricity, it's the stuff that can't be imposed on a town. And in a way, I think the spirit of Basingstoke was written about by Gilbert and Sullivan, because in one of the Gilbert and Sullivan operas, Ruddigore, Basingstoke is used as a code word when Sir Despard's wife is going mad. And she says, whenever I am about to relapse, say Basingstoke to recall me to my saner self. Now, in the modern world, that sounds like they're using this word to calm people down. But Ruddigore was written just after the riots with the Salvation Army. So, in other words, it went, oh, calm down, dear, or you'll end up like Basingstoke, and they're mental. But I think, as an outsider, I think Basingstoke hasn't necessarily stuck to its saner self. It's sort of got this sanity imposed on it, if you like. But I think there's a little sense of brilliant madness and chaos and humanity that is still here, which is why it's brilliant to welcome Dave. Well, I suppose I should let you tell everybody. I'm sure most people here know what it was that you did. A magnificent feat of endurance.
Well, about 2.5, nearly 3 years ago now, I began a world record attempt to row the total distance around the Earth's equator, but rowing all the miles on a static land rowing machine.
And that was in the Festival shopping mall?
That was in the Mall shopping centre, yeah, just outside Festival Place.
Right. And how realistic was it? I mean, did you have people come up with a jellyfish to sting you every now and then? You did tell us a story about one old woman with a 50 pence that I thought that I did think was very moving.
Well, probably about 3-4 months into the row, and
oh, sorry. So where were you? Berlin?
I was probably. I think I was just about to hit Russia. There was a lovely lady that came over, and of course all the money that we raised went to Breakthrough Breast Cancer, brilliant charity. And she came over and she started talking about the row, and I started telling her about the charity and the reasons why I was doing it. And I kind of noticed about 20 minutes in that she had this 50 pence piece that she was just kind of rolling around. And I thought, great, if I can really make this chat count, this is 50p in the bucket. And it had been a tough day, it was kind of lean pickings. And eventually she said, I think this is just wonderful. So tell me, when are you off? And I kind of looked at the ground and looked at her, and I said, well, this is kind of it. And she said, oh, I see, so you're not actually going around the world. And I said, no, this just rowing machine, the Basingstoke. She went, how disappointing. And she put her 50 pence in her purse and off she went to Wilkinson's, and I was heartbroken.
Well, thanks very much, Dave. That's
Thanks
brilliant.
very much.
It's a story of charity and compassion, but also, I think also something wonderful in going to a sterile place like a shopping mall and doing something so wonderfully human like that. There is this stuff going on underneath here, the quirkiness that seems to have survived all the development, that must have somehow lingered on from the time when you were fighting with the Salvation Army. This is people have optimism and heart and are able to poke fun at their own place. So that's why I'll finish with a passage from explorer Roald Amundson's diary, which I think fits the spirit of the town. While some may see only desolation, I can see the beauty in my vista, despite the scenery being the same in all directions. I have come to Basingstoke to buy some Burberry overalls. I have never seen snow cause havoc like this. The Huskies have become disorientated. After 4 days of travelling, they still don't know which exit to take off the Victory roundabout. And yesterday, 2 of our party were attacked by barbarians. Despite this, I believe we will reach the pole before Captain Scott, as he is attempting to get there on a sledge machine in the shopping mall. Our only problem is this cursed perpetual darkness. We've written to the council, but they've only got 24-watt bulbs. Thanks very much, folks.
Mark Steele's In Town was written and performed by Mark Steele, with additional material by Peter Sinclair. The producer was Sam Bryan.